Think of the last thing you wanted to do, but didn't. Maybe it was starting that business, writing that first chapter, sending that message, walking into that room and saying, "I have something to offer." Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Was it really failure you were afraid of? Or was it something quieter than that? Something more specific? Was it someone else's face when you fell? Because there's a difference. And most people never stop long enough to feel that difference. But today we're going to. We've been taught to call it fear of failure. It's a clean phrase. It shows up in books, in therapy sessions, in YouTube videos like this one. Fear of failure. And it's not wrong, but it's not the whole truth either. Because if failure itself was the problem, we'd be just as afraid of failing alone as we are of failing in front of people. But we're not. Think about this. When you make a mistake at home, alone, with no one watching, you might feel frustration, disappointment, maybe even anger at yourself. But when you make that same mistake in front of someone whose opinion matters to you, the feeling is completely different, heavier, warmer. It lives in your chest and your throat at the same time. That's not fear of the mistake. That's fear of the witness. We've been taught to call it fear of failure. It's a clean phrase. It shows up in books, in therapy sessions, in YouTube videos like this one. Fear of failure. And it's not wrong, but it's not the whole truth either. Because if failure itself was the problem, we'd be just as afraid of failing alone as we are of failing in front of people. But we're not. Think about this. When you make a mistake at home, alone, with no one watching, you might feel frustration, disappointment, maybe even anger at yourself. But when you make that same mistake in front of someone whose opinion matters to you, the feeling is completely different, heavier, warmer. It lives in your chest and your throat at the same time. That's not fear of the mistake. That's fear of the witness. There's a word for this. Psychologists call it social evaluation threat. But I want to give it a name that feels more human. I call it the fear of being seen falling. It's the dread of someone watching you reach for something and miss. Of someone seeing the gap between who you said you were and who you turned out to be in that moment. Of giving people evidence that maybe you weren't as ready as you thought. Evidence that maybe the doubt they had about you was justified. Evidence that you are not enough. And here's what makes this so painful, so paralyzing. It's not strangers we're afraid of. It's the people we love, the people we respect, the people whose pride in us we've built our confidence on. Parents, mentors, friends, the version of ourselves we've been performing for years. The fall doesn't scare you. The look in their eyes after the fall, that's what stops you. Fear doesn't come at you loudly. It doesn't say, "Don't do it." It says, "Not yet. You're not ready. What if you're not as good as you think?" It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like patience. It sounds like the voice of someone who actually cares about you. That's what makes it dangerous. Because wisdom says, count the cost. Fear says, count every way you could lose. Wisdom says, be prepared. Fear says, you'll never be prepared enough. Wisdom asks, is this wise? Fear asks, what if they laugh? Those are not the same question. And the life you were meant to live is sitting on the other side of knowing the difference. Fear is a liar, but it's a smart one because it always borrows the voice of reason to keep you standing still. Discernment asks, Is this wise? Fear asks, what if they laugh? Learn to tell the difference. Your destiny depends on it. I want to tell you something about trees. Before a tree becomes what you see tall, visible, unmovable, it spends years doing something invisible, growing downward. Before the first branch reaches toward sky, the roots are going deeper into darkness, finding water, finding ground, finding something to hold on to in the places no one will ever see. The tree doesn't grow in public. The tree grows in private. And then, only then does it rise. Now think about what we do to ourselves. We demand public growth. We want to learn where people can watch. We want to improve where people can measure. We want to become in front of an audience that is not yet safe enough to witness our becoming. And so we stay small, not because we can't grow, but because we refuse to grow in the dark. We refuse to be unseen for the season that growth requires. Let me get honest about something. Shame is not guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. And the fear of being seen failing is at its core a fear of shame. Because in that moment when you fall and someone witnesses it, the mind doesn't say, I made a mistake. The mind says, they now know what I really am. As if the failure is a revelation. As if it has exposed some hidden truth about your worth. That is the lie. Failure is not a revelation of who you are. It is simply information about where you are. There is a difference between what you did and who you are. And the moment you confuse those two things, every failed attempt becomes an attack on your identity. Every rejection becomes evidence against your value. Every stumble in public becomes a verdict. And when failure feels like a verdict, you stop trying. Not because you want to, but because the sentence feels too heavy to risk again. Here's what I want you to really hear. Most of the people you're afraid of disappointing are not even paying attention to you the way you think they are. Every single human being alive is largely consumed by their own life, their own fears, their own insecurities, their own performance. The audience you're performing for? Half of them are too busy worrying about their own audience to notice your fall. And the other half, the ones who are watching, the ones who do notice the ones who judge you, doubt you, whisper about you, they were never going to celebrate you anyway. Let me say that again. The people who would use your failure against you were never going to be the ones who celebrated your success. So why are you writing your life story for an audience that was never rooting for you? Why are you holding yourself back from becoming who you were built to be because of the opinion of people who will forget your name in 5 years? Here's the shift I want to offer you. Growth is private. Fruit is public. You cannot harvest in public what you were not willing to plant in private. The greatest people you admire, the ones who walk with that quiet authority, that unhurried confidence, that deep sense of, I know who I am. They didn't build that in public. They built it in the seasons no one watched, the mornings no one saw, the attempts that didn't work, that no one heard about, the quiet persistence in the dark before the light found them. And here is the most important thing. Every one of them was seen failing. Every single one. They were laughed at, dismissed, overlooked, rejected, doubted. The difference is not that they were never seen falling. The difference is that they decided the fall did not define the direction. They kept moving. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the sting of being seen was smaller than the cost of being still. I want to close with this. There is a version of you fully realized, deeply purposeful, unshakably grounded, that is waiting on the other side of your willingness to be seen falling. Not the other side of success. Not the other side of certainty. Not the other side of perfection. The other side of your willingness to fall in public and rise anyway. Because that is what courage actually looks like. It doesn't look like someone who never stumbles. It looks like someone who stumbles in front of everyone and then stands back up and keeps walking as if the ground beneath them was always going to hold. You were never afraid of failing. You were afraid of being seen failing. And now that you can name it, now that you can look it in the eye and call it what it is, it loses power. It becomes something you can work with, something you can move through, because the roots always grow before the branches, and the branches always rise before the fruit. And the fruit, the life, the purpose, the thing you are here to build it, was never going to grow in a place where no one could see it get rained on first. Go. Plant something, even if someone is watching, especially if someone is watching.